Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romance podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it.
Hi guys, Kasia here. Today I'm going to take you on a journey through Italy as a solo traveler. On this podcast, we've been talking a lot about traveling to and around Italy in hopes of offering you some tips on how to make your experience a more enjoyable one. But we haven't specifically focused on any type of traveler. Since I've been getting a lot of questions from people, whether Italy is a safe country and if it's a good place for solo travel, I thought this would be a great time to address this question. So if you're thinking of visiting Italy on your own, this episode is for you. I don't consider myself strictly as a solo female traveler. I do travel alone quite a bit. Sometimes it's for work, sometimes it's for pleasure, and it's something I'm very comfortable with. Over the years, I've visited many places, not just in Italy, on my own. I've visited Italy alone before we moved here. And since we have moved here, I've also traveled around the country on my own. Traveling alone is something I think a lot of people are doing these days, or definitely thinking about. Sometimes it's out of curiosity, and I think other times it can be that they don't have anyone to travel with. I mean, that's how I ended up going on my first solo trip to Paris many years ago. I had plans to go with a friend. She later backed out. So I just decided to go alone. And the rest, as they say, is history. And I think a lot of people are in the same situation. I think traveling alone is more common these days, and more women are also opting to travel on their own. Plus, there are many resources out there to help solo travelers, not just women, with planning their trips and staying safe. So more people are choosing this as an option. Solo travel is definitely a popular topic and again, a common way to travel, especially these days. As I've been asked specifically about traveling solo in Italy, I'm going to focus in this episode on sharing my experience of what it's like for me to travel alone here in Italy. To give you some context, I've been living in Italy for almost 2 years. And as I said, I can't believe it's almost been 2 years. And my Italian is very basic. I've taken trains, buses, planes, and I've even driven around by myself. So I can offer insights on what it's like from my personal experience. I think it's also worth mentioning that I am fully aware that my experience is not going to be the same as everyone else's. And I don't want to diminish someone else's experience, whether it was better or worse, because I can't speak for them. I can offer you just my own perspective. So despite of not speaking fluent Italian, I do look like I can be Italian, so I don't necessarily stick out as a foreigner until somebody decides to speak to me. I'll try to cover this topic as broadly as I can and address some of the concerns you might have as someone thinking of visiting Italy alone. If you have any specific questions that I haven't covered, feel free to reach out and I'll try to do my best to help you. All right, let's dive into why solo travel is so popular. I think the major reasons for that include one, freedom and independence. For many, the biggest draw of solo travel is the feeling of liberation that comes with traveling on your own. You can set your own itinerary, choose your activities, and you really answer to no one but yourself. This flexibility allows you to truly immerse yourself in a place and experiences that resonate with you. For me, this is a huge plus. Second reason is, of course, self-discovery and challenge. There is no denying that, stepping outside your comfort zone and navigating a place alone can be a powerful confidence boost. I know that's true for me. Solo travel encourages you to be resourceful, adaptable, and self-reliant. This can definitely make you feel confident and, boost your self-belief in your own strength and your capabilities, which I think is also great, whether you're a man or a woman traveling alone. And of course, let's not forget the other benefits of traveling on your own. You have the flexibility. That means you can change the plans as you like. You can change your plans on a whim. So if you have a day planned and you wake up, you're not feeling well, you decide to stay in bed, that's your choice. You can explore touristy places or you can try to find hidden gems. You can go shopping or you can just linger in a museum all day. That's all up to you because there's no one else to tell you that you can or cannot do that. You can also try new things. Solo travel can be a great opportunity to try new things and indulge in activities you might not be able to convince your travel companions to try. We don't always like the same things. So you don't have to feel bad about choosing to do something on your own or choosing or opting not to do something because your travel companion doesn't want to. So again, something like a cooking class or if you want to do a bungee jump, that's all up to you. You don't have anybody else to confirm with. Of course, the other part that I think works not just for solo travelers, but is the meeting new people. So as a solo traveler, I think you're more open and you feel more approachable, but also you are more likely to approach others. I think as a solo traveler, you're more likely to seek out company than if you were traveling with a partner or family. It's easier to strike up conversations with locals or with other travelers who might be also on their own. And that kind of helps you to create connections and form friendships with people on the road. So what makes Italy a great place for solo travel? Well, I think there's so many great reasons, and it has everything to do with the offerings. So Italy has everything I look for in a destination between food, culture, history, art, and our outdoor activities. There's just so much to do for every kind of traveler. Looking at the different books and movies, either filmed or set in Italy, you can see the appeal that seems to draw a certain type of traveler. We've touched upon the show Ripley on Netflix, and besides the actual, how Italy's portrayed in it, it's also a good way to see how he was traveling alone within Italy. And mind you, his experience is a bit different. It's in a different time period, but it's also giving you that inspiration of what it's like to travel in Italy by yourself and just being in the moment. One of the most influential, at least in my opinion, books and movies based on books about solo travel in Italy is Eat, Pray, Love. So the book was written by Elizabeth Gilbert and the movie starred Julia Roberts. The book and the movie, they're not exclusively set in Italy, but a big portion of it is. It's based on the author's her own transformative solo travel experience in Rome. So she explores the city, the rich history. She has immersive experiences with food and people all around her while dealing with, those typical questions of love and happiness. I think this movie alone was the reason for so many people and women in particular coming to Italy to find themselves. The coming to Italy on your own and finding yourself, I think is a very common theme. And it's a place where women in those books and movies seem to venture to. So maybe there is something about Italy and helping you discover yourself that draws the people to come here. Another great example of a book turned into a movie is the Under the Tuscan Sun. I've talked about this book before because I think it's a bit of a romanticized version of what it looks like to come to Italy. In the book, the main character, Frances, comes to Tuscany after a bit of divorce. And of course, she finds joy, renewal, all in this transformative way in a Tuscan villa. So all these movies and books are great inspiration, but I don't think that coming to Italy alone to find yourself is the only reason to come here. I mean, if it's something you're into, great, you do you. But for me, Italy is the best place to explore history, art, and culture. You can explore so many great museums. You can immerse yourself in thousands of years of history and indulge in amazing food all in one day. Like, how amazing is this? There is just so much to see and do here that you definitely won't be bored. And since you can set your own schedule, you can get to see as many museums or churches or eat as much food as you want and whenever you want. So when it comes to safety, Italy is a very safe place, especially for solo travelers and women in general. Now, I've come across a few posts where the authors mentioned that verbal aggression and catcalling from Italian men were common. This hasn't been my experience at all, but like I said at the beginning of the show, this could have been their experience, and I don't want to diminish that. Personally, I've got more unwanted harassment from men back home in Toronto than I've had in Italy, and I don't think you should think of this behavior as the norm. I'm sure, as many women know, men can be jerks in any country, and that's something we unfortunately all have to be dealing with more so than we ever wanted to. Italians are generally friendly to tourists and can be very curious about you and where you're coming from. So they might ask you, where you're going, where you've been? What are you seeing? And they're very happy to offer you advice and suggestions. I found that they get almost delighted when you mention visiting places that are not on top of like every tourist Italian itinerary. And they look at you in a more positive way. I've also never had any issues with eating alone, be that in a restaurant, coffee shop, or a takeout place. With so many tourists coming to Italy each year, I think they're used to seeing people, and women in particular, traveling alone, that it's not something that they consider out of the norm. The only place I think you should definitely be mindful and aware of your surroundings are the touristy spots. As it is in many countries, pickpocketers are always milling around spots when many tourists go. One of the times we were in Rome, someone got their wallet stolen, like by the Trevi fountain. It's not surprising as it's a very small area. And when you have lots of people, especially when they're all getting distracted with taking pictures, that's why the thieves make their moves, right? So staying vigilant and being aware of your surroundings is the number one advice to any traveler, not just for the solo traveler, and it's not just limited to Italy. Now that I hope you're feeling confident about traveling to Italy alone, let's talk about actually planning your trip. If this is your first trip to Italy, I recommend starting with bigger cities. You're looking at Rome, Florence, Palermo, Naples, Venice, etc. These are very touristy destinations, and here you're likely to find more resources for travelers, but you also find other solo travelers. So let's say if you don't speak Italian or just know a few phrases, you'll probably be more comfortable in a touristy place where people are likely to know English at some level. This, of course, depends on your comfort and abilities. So some people have no problem traveling to a place where they don't speak the language and the locals don't speak English and be totally fine. Others may feel more self-conscious or uneasy. So it's up to you. You decide. Now, when it comes to Italy, the biggest cities I've mentioned are also the most visited ones. There are plenty of other places that might not be as large, but are also great to visit. Places like Bologna, Cinque Terre, Chieti, Lecce, and so on. These are all great to explore. I mean, this is Italy. There's no shortage of amazing towns for you to visit. Just because someone else goes to Rome, Florence, and Venice doesn't mean that you have to as well, or at least don't go just to those places. So when it comes to smaller towns and regions, you're less likely to find English spoken there. In restaurants, museums, or bars, you'll find probably someone who speaks a bit of English or can communicate with you on some level, but I would say that's not the norm. Visiting places like this can be amazing and very rewarding experience. But again, it all comes down to your level of comfort and language skills. You can't expect everybody to speak English, especially in the places that are not the common tourist destinations. And I mean tourists as in non-Italian tourists. Now let's talk about accommodation. As a tourist destination, Italy obviously has all the options. So you have hotels, motels, bed and breakfast, Airbnbs, and so on. Many solo travelers prefer staying in hostels, and you'll find many of them in Italy, especially in larger cities. Hostels are a great option if you want to meet other people and you're looking for that social component, right? They often have events or like a get-togethers, or you can even just hang out and chat with other people. Hostels might not be as common in smaller cities and like the less touristy ones, but you're still likely to find private rooms, Airbnbs, and small hotels. One of the best ways to experience Italy is by staying at it's called agriturismo, which is kind of like a farm stay. So these are outside the city centers and are mostly family run, which means you're likely to interact directly with the locals and get great insights for, what to do and see in the area. Hotels, of course, are the obvious choice for many as they come in many options from budget to luxury. So you have a great choice of the hotel you want to stay at. Hotels are great if you crave privacy and can offer more security than a hostel might. Also, if you like that, having your own bathroom and your own bed without anybody interfering, that's always a great option. I always opt for hotels when I travel alone, but, private apartments and bed and breakfast are great too. I've stayed in both and they were fantastic. Now let's talk about traveling within Italy. I love taking trains in Italy as they often offer an opportunity to just see the landscapes and, you can just sit there, relax. And they're also quite reliable and quite fast. Italy has a very robust transportation network with very good and fast connections. I mean, comparing to Canada, they are light years away here. I often take the train in Italy and I've only had an issue once with the train being delayed. So you can get your ticket at the train station or with an app. I use the app Omnia. It's fast and easy, and you can get your ticket directly on your phone. These days, the ticket machines at the train stations or bus stations, even subways, they come with like a different language option. So you can choose whatever language you speak if you don't know Italian and get your ticket that way. But it also makes it easier to figure out like how to get a ticket and where you're going without having to ask someone and rely on someone else's assistance. You might have heard about having to validate your tickets before you get on the train here in Italy. But with an app, you don't have to. So if you get your ticket on your phone, you don't have to validate, just show them QR code. If you get a ticket from the certain machines, you also don't have to validate it. I honestly have never validated a ticket because I always get the app. I don't remember what it was like in the past, but right now I always use the app, so I never have to validate a ticket and you never forget. Because you don't want to get on the train without validating your tickets because you can get very hefty fines. So if you're not sure if you should validate your ticket or not, just ask. Usually at train stations, somebody will speak some English to tell you, do you have to validate it or not? And that way you can avoid paying a fine and you'll be fine. Buses are also a great way to travel around Italy. As great as the train network is, it doesn't reach all the cities. And, you might have to rely on the bus as your next best option. Bus schedules are now often available online. So you can just, Google the name of the town you are going from to and the bus schedule, and you'll get this information. The app I mentioned, Omnia, also covers buses and flights. So if you're not sure how to get from one place to the next, you can just put that information. It gives you all the options and you can just book it through there, which makes it a lot easier. And you don't have to figure out how do I get from place A to place B. Now, if you're feeling adventurous and confident, I recommend renting a car. Road tripping in Italy is really one of my favorite ways to see the country. Having a car gives you just so much more freedom to visit smaller and off the beaten track places that you might not be available if you only rely on trains and buses. Driving in Italy is not that complicated, although I would say if you are traveling and staying in bigger cities, you don't need a car. You can just use public transit or walk around, and then you don't have to worry about, having your car parked somewhere and then worrying about driving. If you're going outside of the biggest cities, that's when I recommend taking a car. The rules of the road apply the same as they do in many other countries. That's very similar to Canada. They drive on the right-hand side of the road. The speed limit varies between 50 kilometers in towns to 130 on the highway. So the signage is easy to follow and understand. If you get a GPS, whether it's on your phone or it comes with the car, it'll tell you where to go. So you really don't have to worry about anything. There are also toll booths here, which you may or may not be familiar with, depends where you come from. We don't really have too many of those in Canada, but they're very simple to navigate. I'll link a post about driving in Italy in the show notes. So if you're looking for more information on that topic, you can check it out. It's important to note that you need an international driver's license, or sometimes it's called international driver's permit. And you can get it from your local automobile association. Like in Canada, we have the CAA. You have to have a valid driver's license and a photo and go and apply for your permit. And then when you come to Italy, you rent a car, you show them your permit, and you can drive around. It's important to have the international driver's permit because if you get stopped and you don't have it, you're going to have a lot of problems. So I just get it. And, those are pretty easy to get. They're valid for a year and you can use them in many countries around the world. So if you plan on traveling to other places, it's always good to have. When it comes to budgeting for your trip, your biggest expenses will probably be accommodations, transportation, and food. I find Italy very affordable, but that's also something that varies across the country depending on where you go. Obviously, places like Milan, Lake Como, Florence might be more expensive than when you go to like Naples, Palermo, or even like smaller towns in, say, Puglia or in Abruzzo. So when it comes to Rome, that's also a hit and miss. It's a good example of a city that you can get a wide price range. So for a cappuccino and a croissant, that can set you back anywhere between €2.20 to like €5.50. It depends really where you are. No matter what city you're in, expect to pay more in obviously the touristy areas than you would pay in a coffee shop or a restaurant, maybe a few streets over from like the main strip. Generally, the prices in Italy, I think, are very good for food and drinks. But if you want to save money and you don't want to necessarily go out all the time, you can always buy groceries from the grocery store or a market and just make your own meal. If you want to go with that option, make sure that you choose accommodations that offer a kitchen and a fridge so you can actually make those meals yourself. Depending on when you're traveling and where, will also impact how much you'll pay for a hotel. A hotel in Rome, even outside of the tourist season, will cost you more than a hotel in a small town, even in high season. So, again, you have to research the prices ahead of time to get an idea of how much you'll need to spend. This will give you a better idea of how much you have to budget. I use the app booking.com and I save the different hotels or whatever apartments into a list. So if I'm traveling to Rome, I'll save them in the Rome file. And then when I want to go back and look, I have those places saved and I know the prices go up and down. And when I'm ready to book, I just go ahead. Now let's talk about making the most out of your solo experience. If you come to Italy for a short city break or even a few days, you might be perfectly happy with just walking around the city of your choice and maybe hitting a museum or two and then grabbing some food. If you plan on spending more time here, I recommend taking advantage of walking tours. There's also cooking classes and meetups. It's a great way to see a place and also get a feel for the local culture, right? You'll have a local guide that will show you around and make the destination a bit more familiar so you're not so unsure about where to go and what to see. You can always ask them questions too, which is also helpful if you're in a new place that you haven't been before. I was in Rome recently and I took a pasta making class and I actually ended up having a blast. Sure, yeah, it was mostly couples in my group, but that didn't really stop me from going on my own and doing, the class and learning how to make pasta. Walking tours are also great and they come in many different options. So you can go for a food walking tour, to architecture or like cultural tours. There's just so many to pick from that will make the destination appeal more to you. You can find a lot of great tours online. I have some that I recommend as well. But also, if you have the Airbnb app, you can find a lot of activities there as well. So again, you have lots of choices. When it comes to exploring beyond the place you're in, and if you're not interested in renting a car or figuring out the train and bus options, you can do a day trip. These are also great as they allow you to go from a destination without worrying about the logistics. So you don't have to think about, oh, how do I get there? What do I do? Where is the place? For example, if you're in Rome and you fancy a trip to Pompeii or a winery tour in Tuscany, but you don't want to bother with figuring out how to get there, book a day trip. All you have to do is show up and let someone else do the planning. I mean, it's great. When booking these, though, make sure that you read what the tour includes and what it doesn't, because sometimes they include just the transportation, while others include transportation plus admission and a guided tours. Make sure you check that so there are no surprises when you get there and it's not what you expected. Now, the most common question, when is the best time to visit Italy? I think that Italy is a year-round destination. Now, having lived here for almost 2 years, I can tell you that it is. You can come here at any time. Summer months are obviously going to be the hottest and, of course, most touristy. This is when you have a lot of families with kids and students and summer breaks traveling. There's nothing wrong with that. But as a solo traveler, you have to keep in mind that the prices will also be more expensive. A lot of people will tell you that the best time to visit Italy is either in May, April, or like the September, October. And they're not wrong, but I would argue that January to March or even November, December are even better. And here is why. Most people outside of Europe think of Europe as a summer destination because when it's the middle of winter in Canada, for example, you're probably thinking of going somewhere hot in the Caribbean, not Italy. But here's the thing. Winter in Italy is not what we think of winter in Canada, for example. Sure, if you go to the north, you get snow and cold. That's obvious because that's where the Dolomites are. But it will never get as cold as it gets in Canada. And you know what I'm talking about if you're from Canada. It doesn't get as cold here. Places like Rome have a very mild winter, and you can even walk around in a light jacket and be fine. I was in Naples in January, and it was a gorgeous day. I think the temperature that they hit almost like 20 or even more than 20 degrees, and it was a sunny day. It was just glorious. And again, it was January. It was like the first week of January. It's not to say that like every day is like that, but you'll get more sunny days and warmer days. I was also in Rome and Bologna in February. And well, it was raining those days when I was there, but it was still warmer. And, there's something magical about experiencing places like Rome or Bologna in the rain because it just looks so much more, I don't know, magical. Don't look at this and say, oh, it's going to be raining. I'm not going to enjoy it. I think you will. It's just a different atmosphere. Last November, we drove to the Amalfi Coast and it was still very warm. So much so that people were even going in the water. Like, how crazy is that? You don't think of November as a great place. But yeah, you still have great days. You can go in the water, not everywhere, but at the Amalfi Coast, when we were there, people were still going in the water. Were there tourists? Of course there were. Like, this is Italy. You'll always find tourists. But there were just not as many as you would have during peak season. So, museums, archaeological sites, bars, restaurants, they stay open all year round. So why wouldn't you consider coming here in the winter? To me, that's a no-brainer. I think if you do, you'll have a better, more authentic experience and you'll probably spend less money. So, do you need to speak Italian when traveling in Italy? I'm going to say no, you don't have to, but it definitely helps if you know some basic phrases and words. Even words like hello and thank you can, go a long way. I use a translation app on my phone as a backup in case I don't know how to say something or I need, more detailed information that I can't come up with on my own. As already mentioned, I use apps to book tickets and accommodations. So they definitely make things easier. But if you use, let's say, Airbnb app or bookings, you can communicate with your host or the hotel in your language and it will just translate the conversation. So they will get it in their language and you can ask your questions in English. And it makes it a lot easier in case you're looking for some information ahead of time. And, you want to make sure that you find the information you're looking for. Now, I do say that you don't have to speak Italian, but also don't expect everyone else to speak English to you. Try learning a few words in Italian and you'll have a better experience. So for some final words, I think Italy is a great place for solo travel, whether you're a female or not. As a solo female travel myself, I found Italy safe, welcoming, and easy to get around. And I really hope this episode has eased your fears about coming to Italy on your own and that you feel more confident about booking your trip. Make sure to check out the show notes for this episode and share with anyone who is thinking of traveling to Italy. I hope you have a great trip to Italy and you enjoy traveling solo. Happy travels.
And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review on whatever you're listening right now. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.